Hello.
Hey, I was just getting into the music. Hello. Hi again, Scott.
Hello again, Randall. And hello again, everybody else.
Yep.
So, hey, it's good to see everyone back. Raf, as always, Steph, how are you? Elias, um, and a few names that I'm afraid I can't pronounce, and I will try to I'll try to be polite and not destroy your names. So, hello, everyone. We are back. I am Scott Stahl.
And I'm Randall Schwartz.
And this is Humpday Q&A from Flutter Community.
Yes.
So today we have a very special guest, Fitz from Flutter's DevRel, and we're going to be talking to him here in just a moment. There are a few little things going on in Flutter that's pretty interesting. Let's see. Randall, what have you been seeing in the Stack Overflow chat this week?
Nothing particularly stands out, just the usual sorts of confusion, but I've had to refer to my Future Builder and Stream Builder screencast that I made, must be 3 months ago by now. Just the TLDR is, don't build the stream in the stream : argument of a stream builder. It gets into an infinite loop, and you say, where's my data? So don't do that.
There you go. We've got lots of lists of things to not do, like when you're testing. When you're running your testing, know the difference between an on tap and an on press.
Yes.
Because an on press only goes down, and on tap goes down and up. And if your function triggers on an on tap, it's going to trigger on the up, not on the down. So if you use an on press, you're going to be going in circles thinking there's something wrong with your code, when the only thing wrong is that you're calling for the wrong test. So
yes,
keep that one in mind. That'll save you an hour.
I like to say, as a Flutter GDE, I make the mistakes so you don't have to.
There we go. And that's what the boring show is about.
Okay. And live coding. I did live coding last week in Riverpod demonstration, and it was like, I kept getting a few things wrong, but it was fun. My typing's not as fast anymore because I have a really sad keyboard, but
I keep a container of incense over there that I burn before trying to do live coding. And just
yes. Face the right direction, pay tribute to the appropriate deities. Yes. It's all important for live coding. Absolutely.
So, Raf, no test, no problems. Oh, man.
We have code of conduct to read still?
Yeah, I guess we do have a code of conduct, don't we?
Because we do want to get right into this show.
Yes,
we'll explain why in a second. All
right. So we want to be nice, be respectful, be constructive. Yes, it's YouTube. That's not an excuse. Do not post anything that is adult content, rude, offensive statements. We have kicked and banned people, not just from this, but also from Slacks and everywhere else, for really going over the top and being a total ass. If you pull something here, believe me, it will follow you. Don't advertise or promote your products, please. Don't spam the same question over and over. We do see it. We also have questions that we got during the week. We also have questions people have talked to us about. We have other things that come up. It might be a while before we get around to you, but we try to answer every single question. Harassment of any kind not tolerated. Failing the code to be blocked from interacting in the chat. Thrown out of the Slacks. And a whole lot of other things. Well, we are good friends with the guys over in Discord. So, and we do talk to each other.
And we should we should explain that Simon won't be with us this week. He is extremely busy. And so at some point, I'm going to get elevated from guest host to co-host. We're trying to work that out behind the scenes.
I thought we were there. Oh, no, that's right. We need to redo the slide, don't we? We need to redo the slide.
It's all good.
Again, my name is Scott Stahl. I have been helping build the Flutter community since September of 2017. I am the organizer of GDG Cleveland. That's a Google developer group. We're now allowed to say that. We weren't allowed to say it before. Long story. You don't care. But, and I am in Cleveland, Ohio. It is wonderful and sunny today. Wait 5 minutes. It'll change. Randall, how about you?
I am Randall Schwartz. I am of the first group of Flutter and Dart GDEs. I got brought in fairly early on. That's Google Developer Expert. Basically what that means is unpaid DevRel. So I get to sit between the company and y'all with my ear to both sides, trying to figure out what the heck's going on with Flutter and also solving your problems. To do that, I go through everything that's listed at flutter.dev/community. I patrol all the channels in all of those sites. So I spend maybe 1 to 2 hours a day answering your questions, sometimes in real time. And it's been exciting. It's been fun. And I also got my first Flutter paying gig just recently, which I'm really excited about, but I can't tell you anything about it. I'm sorry, but it's exciting. It's fun.
Sometimes that's the way.
Really hacking Flutter code for money. Boy, what a fun.
There you go. There you go. All right. And really, you're not paid for DevRel, but you can't say you're not compensated because they sent you some really cool socks.
And my Flutter code.
And the jacket.
My Flutter hoodie. Yes, right.
There we go.
So I do have a few things from that.
All righty. Now, just to let you all know, Fitz has a hard stop. He's got a meeting he has to get to in 50 minutes. So we also want to leave him some time to run between here and there. He can't stay here until 60 seconds before. So why don't we get him on here?
Sure.
Fitz.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all.
Hi.
Good to see you. Let's pretend I have no idea who you are. Who are you, Fitz?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Fitz. I'm a developer advocate on the developer relations team for Flutter. I think I've had a lot of questions recently on what does developer relations really mean. I think there's a lot of different definitions about that about it. My definition is I'm here to help teach people and help teach people how to do Flutter better. That's it. That's my job. I'm a professional teacher.
Yep, I know the feeling. I'm not going to say for who just yet because it would be advertising, but I did just pick up a job myself doing developer relations for another company. And maybe we'll do a show at some point about how to use that product, but that is not this show.
Fair enough.
So, Fitz, as DevRel, you and I know that we're kind of the fulcrum. And as Randall was saying, because Randall's doing unpaid developer relations as a GDE, basically what this all means is there's the public and there's the engineering team. And what you have to realize is the engineering team is not purposely ignoring you folks out there. What it is they've got their heads down working very, very hard, and they don't realize when the sun goes down, let alone what your questions and concerns are. And that's why they have people like Fitz. So Fitz, what do you do to make sure the team understands what the rest of the world wants and needs? Yeah,
I think there's a lot of listening that goes on. And so I personally am not the most active responder to things in the community. You may have not seen my name around and about, but seen me on videos and things like that. That's because I listen a lot, I read a lot, and I hear where your troubles are and your complaints are, and your good moments as well. So reading comments, reading Reddit posts and reading Stack Overflow and all these things just to understand where are the pain points, because as you said, the engineering team doesn't really have the time to go through all of that. And so we read a lot of these things. And then it's also about, there's a more active form of listening, and this is not the normal definition of active listening, but I'm going to torture the phrase a little bit here and use it in a different way, which is to say that it's also trying things out. So if I see that people are having trouble with state management, for example, to choose the simplest and most common example, how am I going to understand how to explain it to the engineering team if I don't also understand what is going on and how that problem is manifesting? And so the quote unquote active listening part there would be more around like, just practicing it myself and coding myself and trying things out myself so that I then, can go back to the engineering team and tell them, hey, I tried this out and it was really hard. Could you please make it easier? Pretty please?
Yep. And what I had happen is the bosses where I'm at, they said, check out the product. And I said, okay, what would you like me to do? They said, just here's the website, go. And if you have any problems, that's, we need to know the point of view of someone who's coming at this with absolutely no idea what they're going to find. And you're perfect if we don't tell you anything.
Yep,
So.
Exactly. You get really good in developer relations at trying things out from a newcomer's perspective. It's just one of the things that they that people really appreciate developer relations for, is to come in and experience it different than someone who has been heads down working on the project for a really long time.
Yeah. Makes me a little crazy when documentation is written by engineers on the project for other engineers on the project in terms that only they can understand.
Yeah, exactly. I think even some of the Flutter documentation, like some of the reference docs in particular that are attached to certain widgets, you're like, I have no idea how to use this widget because you just told me that the render object widget is used for rendering widgets and is the object that does that. And you're like, yes.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's a real example, but like,
no, Brian.
I will say overall that the Flutter and Dart documentation for a quote unquote open source project is far better than almost any other open source project I've seen.
That's even closed. Well, okay. Yeah, no, I haven't seen too many closed source, but yeah. I mean, it is amazing. And the thing is too, since IO in 2018, we had some discussions about that when we were all together. And I've watched the changes in the documentation since then, since some conversations we've had, and it's been amazing. It really, really has.
Yeah, huge credit to Shams, our primary technical writer, who does a ton of work there to make that awesome.
The mother of Dash, by the way.
Yes, exactly. The mother of Dash. I don't know which way to point on the camera. Somewhere. There you go.
Your right arm.
Over there. There we go. And I also say that if you see something in the docs that aren't clear, whether it be the core documentation on like API Flutter Dev or Dart Dev, or if you see it in the like the code labs or anything else, or the website, there's almost always a link in the upper right hand corner that will take you to the original source for that page. And that will be adjacent to a link later for issues. File issues. Even if you don't understand what this should be, say, I don't understand what this should be.
No, and you should file the issue because you don't understand what it should be, and it's documentation.
That improves the quality for everybody.
If you don't understand what it is after reading the documentation, they need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the comments we often see a lot is like, oh my gosh, Flutter, like, is it worth using in production? I see there's like 8,000 issues or whatever on the repository. Is that a bad sign? No, it is not a bad sign. It's because exactly to your point, the reason we like having so many issues and would like to have more issues is because that's how we know what is wrong and how to improve things. And so
make it better.
Please file more. Yeah.
I mean, I get the first question for the first timers a lot, which is, how can I contribute? I don't know the code that well. File issues. If you get something that doesn't work, or you see a feature, or you know of a feature that you want, but it isn't there, file an issue. It will get handled. I usually see issues against Flutter and Dart SDKs responded to within 24 hours. I don't know if that's an internal mandate or not, but it is amazing to see the immediate response to my issues being filed.
Nice. So I'm just taking a look at
chat
here.
Yep.
Let's see what we've got here.
So I'll ask Fitz a question while you're waiting. What specifically will you be doing? Monitoring these different sites? Will you be going to GDGs and checking out what's going on there? That kind of thing?
Yeah, that sort of thing. Usually what'll happen is and this is pretty similar across the DevRel team, is we'll try to pick an angle or a lens to view things in. So, for example, a while back, Philip was looking at performance. Yeah. And so trying to find issues and ways to make your apps a little bit more performant, a little bit faster. and I've been recently looking at what are common ways that people misinterpret or misunderstand concepts in Flutter.
Hmm.
This is the basis of the Decoding Flutter series that we started, and that's the lens that I take. And where the rest of that content comes from, yeah, we'll talk to GDEs, we'll talk to Flutteristas, we'll go to dev fests and meetups and all these things, and just
Cool.
kind of chat with people.
Yeah, like the thing I mentioned at the top of the show about Stream Builder, it's such a common problem. And then I noticed Future Builder talks about storing the feature first. Stream Builder doesn't. I'm going to go file a bug against the Stream Builder page right away because I keep pointing people to the first 2 paragraphs of the page, but it's the wrong page now.
Right. Yeah. Maybe we should do an episode on Stream Builder.
Yeah, isn't that
There we
interesting?
there. Hey, you know what? We're trying to drag Nilay in here more often. We're going to be trying to drag Chris in here more often. Try to drag you and Andrew in here. It's hard to get Andrew anymore lately. I don't know
Yeah,
what he's
yeah.
been doing.
His
Busy.
time has been booked up. Yeah.
So, hey, we have an interesting question for you. Okay. So, how hard is a DevRel job? What's your work-life balance? Since he's seen everyone active on social media outside of office hours, this is something I yell at Nilay for.
Yeah, it's burnout is pretty common in DevRel, to be honest. But that's because there's so many different things you can be doing in developer relations. There's not one thing you can be doing. And then on social media, it's this gray area between personal life and work life, right? Because I've had my Twitter handle for many years. I think I created it in 2008. Anyways, doesn't matter. It's been around for a long time, right? And so when I come home from work, I mean, coming home from work is I moved to over here rather than over here. But when I come home from work, like then the Twitter account is still the same thing, and so like I'm still active there. And then like there's sometimes questions about Flutter, and yeah, I like to respond to them. But and so like that can lead to burnout in some ways. But I think there's different kinds of stress in life and different kinds of stress in the world, and just because it is stressful doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, and just because you've spent a lot of energy on it and just because you're really tired from doing it, like maybe that's good energy that you've spent and that you really like what you're doing. And so I think yeah, that does happen, but to more pointedly answer the question, is DevRel hard? As in all things, it depends. It depends on your perspective and what exactly you're trying to do. So for example, if I definitively determined that what Flutter needed was to have a first-party implementation of some kind of higher-level state management. Like we need to integrate Riverpod straight into first-party Flutter framework, and I absolutely 100% believe this. Let's suppose that I did. I'm not saying that I do, but let's suppose that I did. I'm likely going to have a really hard time convincing everyone who matters on the Flutter framework that that's going to be necessary, and I'm going to then make my life very hard, and it's going to be a really hard job because I had decided that this is the thing that I'm going to push for.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
you push for it, but you have to know when to let it go too.
Yeah, exactly, and that is the other hard-ish part of it is trying to make those decisions and like what is worth pushing on and what do you just let go.
And something like that requires a lot of consensus gathering, which is a skill into its own. And many people don't have that skill. They just have the pressure skill, and that's no fun.
Yes. Influence without authority is a term we throw around a lot.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But also, Ganesh, just to give you an idea, I like to think of it as you have to chew gum and hop on one foot while spinning plates with both hands and on your other toe, because you give talks, you write articles, you speak at events, you generate tutorials, you answer questions, you take notes on what everybody's problems are, what they like and what they don't like also. Then you take those notes back to the engineering team and you try to convince the engineering team to make changes in order to address some of those pain points. And then the engineering team says, well, we've got 27 other things ahead of that. And you try to say, you don't understand, we're losing developers over this. But you, again, as Fitz said, you push for what you believe, but sometimes you have to keep the peace too. And also, Fitz, I guess I forgot the part about when the engineering team thinks that the public is not understanding something, you need to reach out and help the public understand that as well and make their lives easier.
Yeah, and I really like your analogy of the fulcrum earlier of like being between the two things. The similar analogy that I use there is that DevRel exists on a bridge, and on one end of the bridge is the developers and the engineers that are building the thing that you're DevRel for. And on the other side is the users, the developers who are using the framework. And as DevRel, you're stuck in the middle. And sometimes you're going on one side, sometimes you're going on the other side. And ultimately, if one side doesn't understand something, there's usually something the other side can do to help the other side. And so like you exist in this middle and you're trying to do things on both ends. And yeah, that can be hard sometimes.
That's a similar metaphor to what we used to use as I was learning to be a technical writer, was the idea that of course, as an engineer, I already know the engineering side of things, but if I'm not writing it down in the manuals in a way that is in the user's realm of language and abstractions and things like that, it's a useless product.
Yeah.
And it's a really important skill to learn, is that translation from human to engineer. I'm not saying anything bad about engineers. I'm just saying that's just kind of the two poles of that.
Yeah.
It was a useful part of my early learning career to learn how to be a technical writer on top of everything else that I already had. So it was fun.
Yeah, before I got into tech, I was giving talks about other things and teaching people, and I refer to it as the expert's disease. You reach a certain point in skill that you can't remember what it was like to be a beginner.
Right.
You can't remember a time before, and that's when, if you consider the basics to be common sense, you have expert's disease. Because there was a time when the basics were not common sense to you and you've forgotten it. Which makes it very difficult for anyone you're teaching to understand what you're talking about. Nilai's here.
Hey.
A couple of other things in the chat. First of all, hi, Nilai.
Hi, Nilai.
A couple ones real quick. John, join the club. We're having jackets made. Nilai's going to get them for us.
Yeah.
And also, Fitz, we were talking about being a bridge for maybe things the engineering team would like the public to know. So that leads us right into the next question, which is, what excites you the most from recent news in the world of Flutter?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really hard to answer because there's a lot of things. And it's also hard to answer because we've got a small event thing coming up next week. And yeah, just a small one. And so I don't want to spoil announcements and things that are coming out next week, but so I need to choose my words carefully. But one of the things that I really like is that we're really trying to focus on stability and production quality things. And so I think for a long time, especially before Flutter Engage, where we launched 2.0, Flutter, I think in some ways was seen as, this is a really great tool for prototyping a user interface. And yeah, that's neat. And then you can do some generative art on top of that. And it's really cool. And it's like, you can do some really cool things with it. But I think the jump into production quality apps is something that's really important for a framework designed to build apps. And I think we've we showed a lot at Engage about how we're trying to make sure that is possible, and we're emphasizing that a little bit more coming up, and really trying to look at performance, stability, debugging techniques, testing techniques. Null safety is a huge part of that because it improves your ability to not have null reference errors. So I think I didn't really answer the question, but I'm just excited about the general direction of Flutter being towards working on these production quality apps.
Well, I know more and more companies are building Flutter applications because it's getting easier and easier to find Flutter jobs on all the traditional job boards. So it's clearly coming around. This is clearly, I think the Flutter 2 announcement had a huge bit to do with that. Although I think people had excessive expectations about how good desktop and web would be already, given that they were sort of like just pushed into stable, not really. I mean, they pass all the tests and everything, but it still seems a bit early for all of those projects. But at least they're there now to play with, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been actually using desktop a lot to just run test apps, in part because it starts up a lot faster than shuttling things over to an emulator or a real device. But desktop, it's coming along.
I like it because it's resizable, so it helps me test the reactive programming, responsive programming.
Yeah.
Because I can quickly do that. I used the web for that for a while, but because the web is a JavaScript rather than a VM-based system, some of the plugins don't work as well.
Very true.
Yep. One of the common things you were talking about, what's hard about doing the kind of role that I guess we're all doing essentially, is that people want the shortcuts sometimes, and they come to the chat rooms. There's a shortcut on Discord called !tour, and it simply says read the darn Dart tour. And it's because so many people go, well, how would I do this, or what does the factory mean? And it's like, that's all in there for a reason. You need to get the fundamentals about the language. Dart is an essential part of the Flutter framework. And if you don't have some, so I always tell people, read the Dart tour, at least skim the Dart library tour so you get a sense of the libraries that are right there in the box, out of the box. And then read the Flutter overview stuff. Do as many of the code labs as you can, or at least read them, and skim the Flutter cookbook. There are so many great ideas about fundamental stuff that you need in all 5 of those resources that, like I said, the Google team has done an incredible job at creating all the material and keeping it up to date, which is tricky, especially now with null safe and all the other stuff. And please read those things.
People have put a ton of work in them. I'm sorry, Fitz?
No, I was just going to kind of answer John's question statement of not being able to learn fast enough, and kind of pulling in some of what Randall was just saying about. So I've been reading a book called How to Learn, How People Learn, rather. It's a research report on academic sciences and learning sciences, and one of the things they say there is that experts have developed a conceptual framework for the thing that they're an expert in. And part of that framework allows them to have very fast, if not immediate recall of memories, of facts, of things that they need to know within that thing. Part of what Randall is saying, like skimming through the cookbook docs, reading through the tour, reading through a lot of the materials, a lot of that, the purpose of that is to give you a framework for where to find facts and where to find things when you don't know that something or how something works, right? Because if you say, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, I'm going to play DevRel.
Okay.
Yeah. Fitz is the engineer. The audience is the rest of the world. Fitz, I'm sitting out here in the audience and I'm thinking they have concept something immediate recall. What?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's so let me change what I said.
See, and this is the engineering team responding to DevRel
Yes,
instead of telling us to go away.
All that technical jargon comes out, and but anyway, so experts have a way of thinking about things, and it's not innate. It's not a part of who they are. It's not how their brain works, but they've developed and they've practiced this way of thinking about a particular thing. And so because it's about a particular thing, you can be an expert in something and you have that structure in your brain about how to remember facts about that thing. And you could be a complete novice in something 100% totally different, because you haven't developed and you haven't learned how to think about the thing over there. Mm-hmm. And so most of what being an expert is about is developing those shortcuts. Like novices and people coming in new to a thing want those shortcuts, as Randall was saying. And they do exist, but they're largely brain neural pathways, and you don't develop those brain neural pathways unless you spend some time with it and try to learn the landscape of the thing that you're working in.
One of the things I really enjoy is the fact that the Flutter SDK is all the source codes there. So if I'm looking at something and saying, how does the container actually work with that padding? I can immediately hit a key and my IDE shows me the source code to how padding works in container. And this is unlike if I was developing against the vendor platforms, because I'd hit the wall at the API and I wouldn't know behind the scenes how does that work. Especially important when I want something that's similar to the way something works, but not exactly, and the particular knob wasn't provided to do that. I can just simply copy paste that whole thing into a file and name it my container. Yep. And do exactly what I want to with it. There's no, you really do control every pixel on the screen.
Yep.
And this is really important to keep understanding about Flutter versus everybody else.
Okay, so we've got a few things in YouTube here. I want to try to answer quickly so we can keep on going, but I don't want to fall too far behind. Yeah. Okay, going in order here. Rona says there's no exact answer. Set aside project time to upgrade to Flutter 2. Rona, as far as I know, the only big things you would need to worry about are raised button to elevated button, flat button to text button. And for those of you who are saying that you'd have to change your code around for null safety, that's not Flutter 2, that's Dart 2.12. Different subject. Yep. Please don't confuse the two. Fitz, you clearly have more.
I was just numbering your things as you went along, but so I don't know if I clearly have more. I think the answer is it depends on your project. Yeah, I mean, it could take just updating the number to Flutter 2 and you're good to go because you haven't used any of the things that changed, and that's fine. And that's going to be relatively instant, but that's probably not most cases. So it depends on your project.
The nice thing is that everything so far on the Flutter 2 change has just been a deprecation, not a deletion.
Yeah.
So you'll get notifications about it in your IDE and in your analyzer, but it won't break anything. It'll still run.
And really, to that point, Randall, there was, just to let folks know, there was a deprecation with a message saying to use XYZ thing. And Randall and I had gone over it, and we realized that it needed to be done differently in order to work. You couldn't just copy the code. So I put in a PR to change it, and the answer I got back was, What they meant was not to copy it literally, but to actually go to that item in the docs and figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
And I was like, so that one's still kind of in limbo, but those are the type of things you can run into. Okay. Moving on quickly.
Questions? Yes.
Is it okay to make an Android app with Cupertino widgets and iOS with Material?
Sure.
If you want to have fun with your friends.
Sure.
If you want to have fun with App Store reviews as well.
Oh yeah, true. True.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that there are many reasons why Flutter controls every single pixel rather than delegating some of the like UI design things to the underlying system is that most apps have their own design system. And they're going to reuse some elements, maybe a toggle switch from Cupertino and maybe a flat button or raised button from Material. But for the most part, the rest of it is relatively unique to that app. And so, sure, if you want to mix them, I don't know, go ahead.
There we go.
Yeah, and but first look at all the things you can do with themes if you can figure them out.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother subject. We could do a whole show on themes. And speaking of design choices,
why won't this be blue? I want this to be blue. What do I have to set to make this button blue? Yeah. Okay.
All righty. Taka, a graphic designer can learn Flutter because of its simplicity. You know, that is one of the things we love. And I didn't just put this up here to make people feel good or something. There's a point. And that point is that we have graphic designers coming to Flutter. We have web developers coming to Flutter. We have people who are doing .NET and C# coming to Flutter because the transition, of course, from C# to Dart is a joke. It's easier to go from C# to Dart than it is to go from Java to Dart. And that's pretty darn easy. Most people can do it before lunch.
I want to talk about that designer thing just for a second, though. Wim Leeler brought me in. Wim Leeler worked for Google for a long time as a Flutter DevRel and brought me in. And one of the first things he said to me is, we've had programmers sit right next to designers. And this is 3 years ago now. And the designer would say, well, make that blue. Oh, make that higher over there. Make that a bigger gap. And once the designer saw how simple the commands were that were changing, they would push over the programmer, just type it for themselves. And it was, and it hit out reload. And it was so amazing. Sorry, Scott, for interrupting.
No, that's fine. But the basic point being that, like when we're giving talks as DevRel, if you are attending a talk, folks, and you're a back-end expert, don't roll your eyes when someone has to ask what a callback is. And if you're a designer, don't roll your eyes when someone has to ask what an aspect ratio is. Okay. People from a lot of worlds are coming to Flutter, and that person who doesn't know what an aspect ratio is can help do your state management like that. And the person who doesn't understand aspect ratios, the other person can help you lay it out and make it beautiful. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Let's see what else we got.
Anything else? Let's see here.
There are a few, but they're not very simple ones.
Let's take a really complicated one. I'll bring out the whiteboard.
Well, modularity. How do you separate different functions in the UI? Doroko, I think. The 2 words: state management.
Yeah.
This is why you see so much talk about state management and people talking about different systems and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which, speaking of, I saw one I wanted to put up.
One additional point on that is that's why there's also a bit of a gray area between state management and dependency management and dependency injection. It's exactly for this reason.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like, as I keep saying, the 2 principles of state management are to handle 2 major issues once your program gets bigger than one screen. And that is rendezvous. How do you find the data you want? And change notification. How do you know when it's different?
Yes.
All state managers ultimately boil down to those 2 things, at least.
Yeah.
So, Yeah.
So speaking of state management, this has been a hot topic among some people. GetX.
He can't say.
Here's the Jerry, the long and the short here. Well, there are a few different things. Number one, a lot of us have been asking each other. We don't understand why there are so many stars. I haven't been able to find anybody who's using GetX. However, I have talked to some people, and they say that GetX is apparently really, really hot in the non-English speaking world of Flutter, which is probably why I haven't run into it. And we're trying to figure a lot of that out. We're hoping to get a state management roundup. Johnny, if you're listening, yes, you're going to be on that invite list to come and talk about GetX. The guy who runs GetX is named Johnny. And one other thing, just so Fitz doesn't have to, I'm going to shield Fitz from this one. If something is put up on the website of state management on the Flutter site, that is not an endorsement. Okay, it's just a list of possibilities. The Flutter team doesn't really promote anything. They suggest using provider. And I think in part is that was very, very close to their original one that they were doing called package provider. And it was almost the same thing, but they said that Remy's provider did the job a little better when they dug into the code. So they said to use his. I'm going to get out of the way.
I will also say that, so Fitz doesn't have to say it, that the Git history for the website is all available. And if you look at Philip's comment about why GetX was removed when it was removed, it tells most of the story.
Yeah, I really wasn't going to. You know what? Let's just put it this way. It just has to do with things that were being said. It has nothing to do with the package or what the package does, etc. Anyway,
then you just look at Riverpod. Ignore everything else.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have. Thank you for the shields. I don't really have any more to add. I was going to say my teammate Philip is really the expert on that particular topic. I've kind of let him take all the context for that. So I don't have a lot to add other than exactly what you both have already said. Like we compile a list of optional available resources in various places.
This is what you can use. This is not what anyone is recommending.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways that we ended up with a block being so popular is we gave a talk a long time ago about this is an option for how to do this thing. And then people took that as you must use this way. And that was not the intention.
You should just ensure equal time. Every conference has to have one talk by every single state management system. Now there's something like 40. I believe writing a state management system is a rite of passage in the Dart community.
I think that at this point we should just have a talk at I.O. where 40 minutes of it is just listing the names of all the different state management options.
Yep.
Oh, man.
We got some more for Fitz here? Got another question?
Well, actually, one sec here. I do want to do one quick little share.
Okay.
And there is a point to this, I promise. So Raf, our buddy Raf, who we do have on here sometimes, he has asked a question. Proper dependency injection library with meta programming incoming when? Well, you see, here's the thing, all right, Raf. That's what we call a bear trap. Okay, Raf has put down a bear trap. I don't know if we should put our foot into this one, should we?
I thought you were going to find simple questions.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah, actually, and in all seriousness, though, Raf is probably one of the people most qualified to answer that question. So why don't you come on here and answer it, Raf? We've got the Q&A coming up.
I've got a Fitz question. So what are your personal Flutter projects like? What are you working on in your spare time?
That's a good question. A lot of the projects I end up working on, or a lot of the code I end up writing is kind of one-off that I use to then produce like a video or something. Those aren't really interesting to talk about, but um, let's see. Good personal project.
I stumped you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, no, that's okay. One of the things I've been trying to look at is I'm oddly fascinated by these idle mobile games where you can just like let them sit and have large numbers become larger numbers, and then click on other things to make larger numbers become even larger numbers, and like I don't know, they're like meditative or something. And there's a new breed of those games that bring that genre and mix it with the tower defense genre, where you can like have creeps coming through, and you have to design different towers and in different ways. And there's like anyways, so I've been trying to start building my own version of one of those in Flutter, using just raw Flutter things, not using a game engine on top of it.
Wow, nice.
And it's tough. I don't have anything to share, but it's something that I've been at least looking into.
It's like most people don't understand that as long as it's 2D, you can pretty much do anything you want. I mean, you could write Tetris in Flutter without a problem. Somebody probably already has. I mean, it's that kind of thing, but and Asteroids and a few other games like that. But it would be tough to do anything that requires 3D rendering. Although, who's the people very good that did the Wallace and Gromit thing? Was that very good? Did that? Somebody did that. I don't know.
It might have been them. I'm not exact. I don't remember exactly who did that. Very Good does a lot of stuff. And I think it was someone else who did the Wallace and Gromit one specifically, but I can't remember their name off the top of my head.
Yeah, but there was a nice mix of 2D and 3D, so it was really seamless and well done. So
very cool.
And just had an update, and I want to find out what happened when I changed.
We've got 10 minutes, and I'm afraid these next couple might take all 10. First of all, any of the usual crew who might come on for Q&A, please check the Wrecking Crew. I just put the link there. You know who you are. You know what I mean. The next one, I'm not looking to answer this right away. And actually, Vinay, you just asked this question 2 different ways. Please don't spam it. I was just about to click on your first one. So let's go with your second one, though. Now, here, instead of answering this right now, I want to point a couple things out. Number one, the first version of your question said Dart.io, which is perfectly fine. Dart.io or Dart HTML. My question, though, is, Vinay, please tell us in chat, as a DevRel thing, okay, Fitz is going to try to answer your question, but the first thing we need to know is what's missing that you want. Okay, that the question isn't you should, or the answer isn't, oh, why not just use it? No, obviously there's something you want that you're not finding, but you're not telling us what that is. So we need to know what it is you're trying to do that you can't do with Dart.io and Dart HTML before we're going to be able to address that. And the next one, this is another one that might take a while. Fitz, buckle your seatbelt. This one's not easy. How is the development of packages supported in order to support more and more device-dependent functions? For instance, screen recording, sharing, hotspot. In other words, I think what they're talking about is interaction with the hardware.
Yeah, or the underlying system in some other way. Brief aside into the theoretical conceptual frameworks again. I'll share a little bit of a DevRel secret, trade secret for you, which is that so sometimes people will ask like, hey, I'm gonna go to this conference, I'm gonna staff our booth, and I'm new to the team, and I'm not an expert in the thing. How do I actually interact with people on the show floor and people who are coming up and asking questions. The answer is to ask questions back.
Okay. Yep.
Yes. Yes.
That's it. That's it. So to what Scott was saying a moment ago, to Vinay's question, yeah, what are you trying to do? The answer to all questions is it depends.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what are you attempting to do and what's not working? And tell me more about that.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't. If you tell us the thing is broken, we can't fix that.
No.
If you tell us I'm having a problem with the thing when I try to do X, here is the result I'm getting, that we can work with.
And the result expected was.
Yes.
Because sometimes we don't necessarily know what you expected it to do.
Yep.
And maybe your expectations are even wrong. You know, you don't know yet.
So
until you give us that.
A good pattern of filing bugs is to have three sections in the bug. The first one is, what did you do? The second one is, what happened after you did that? The third section is, what did you want to happen that was different than what actually happened? Once you have those three sections, that is a good bug report. Often there's more information that's needed, but that's a good foundation for a good bug report.
Yep.
Okay, Vinay, please remember, Fitz has a hard stop. We've got about 3 minutes, and I am watching chat. So unless you clarify, there's not a lot we can do.
Yeah.
All right.
The other, I'll say real quick on Pluto HD's question about packages for specific device things. There's no good straight answer for that, other than with the platform adaptive capabilities in the package system, we can have a package that then delegates to the proper platform or device thing when it's available and when it's possible. And that abstraction allows us to iteratively support devices as we have the time to support them.
Cool.
Very cool. This one I really don't know. Is it possible to use Python via FFI?
Yeah, there's a package that can do that.
I was going to say maybe this is a Tim Sneath question.
Yeah, there's actually a package that you can put multiple languages into, except Perl. It doesn't have Perl. I don't understand why. It has all these other wonderful languages, and then it's missing Perl. Not to say that's not a wonderful language, but no. But yeah, I forget what it's called, but it's
Randall wrote a book on Perl, if you don't know.
Many books on Perl. Sorry. Yes, but yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think
Fitz.
I might be wrong on this, so don't quote me, but I believe FFI works on just calls into the C calling convention for calling something that's not Dart. And so as long as you have some kind of thing that can run in the system you're running on and adheres to the C calling conventions, you ought to be able to in some way FFI into it. So if you can get a Python package to compile down to C Python that can then have the C calling convention, then there might be a way to do it.
I think what he's looking for is Starflet. It must be Starflutter. That's a framework that's been ported multiple places, including Flutter, that allows all these other plugin things like Python, Java, Ruby, Golang, Rust, etc. And it's supported on Android, iOS, and desktop. So cool. I think that's the thing you're looking for there. That's what I was trying. Luckily, the Googles work really quickly here.
Alrighty. Fitz, we don't want to make you late.
I appreciate that.
So yeah, we can't keep getting Googlers if we keep making them late. So, and also the package there that Randall was talking about, I put a link to it in the YouTube chat. And for those of you who are not seeing chat because you're watching this later, there it is. I'll leave it up for a little bit. Or actually, you have the pause button. I don't need to leave it up for a little bit. So, hey, I really appreciate it, Fitz. You got about 90 seconds to get to your next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's enough to go from one room to the next. But yeah,
Nice.
thank you so much for having me
Thanks.
on. This was a joy. It was a pleasure talking to both of you and with everyone in the chat.
Yep.
And yeah, we'll have to come back sometime.
Your
Definitely.
standing invitation whenever you want to.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Fitz.
Good luck with IO prep.
Yeah.
Try to get some sleep.
Yeah, we'll try. Thank you very much. And I hope everyone enjoys the content next week when we've got it up.
Cool.
Very cool. Appreciate it. Take
All
care.
right. Thanks. Bye.
But we're not going
Cut off
away
his
yet.
button.
We're still
We're not
hanging
going
out
away
for some more
just yet.
questions.
No. It might be an early day. I do want to point out one quick thing.
Yeah.
We were talking about the expectations before. Pluto, you think Flutter has great potential if device-specific functions become more widely supported. What I see in your comment actually is you may not be aware of the history of Flutter. On December 4th, 2018, at Flutter Live in London, they launched 1.0. And one of the things they were very clear about in the keynote, and they said over and over and over, Flutter is a UI toolkit. And I always say this in my talks, it's important to remember what Flutter is and what Flutter is not. And the thing is that Flutter has so much capability that you can write your backend in Dart. You have a bunch of these plugins that can do all of your working with Firebase and your IO. And I mean, you can write all your logic, et cetera, and handle all of your UI. But people forget Flutter's a UI toolkit. It's basically an overpowered UI toolkit, overpowered by a lot. Okay. Which means people begin to think that it should be able to do everything that Android and iOS can do. And there is the underlying misinterpretation, because those are operating systems. Okay. It's the job of the operating system to work with device specific hardware. It's not the job of the UI toolkit. The job of the UI toolkit is to interface with the operating system, but the main way that we have things that do that is community packages. Because remember, Flutter is open source. Google is driving it, but Google doesn't own it. So if you want to see more things working with these functions and many more applications, such as you're saying right here, meeting software with screen sharing and such functions, and especially now that Flutter is coming to desktop, I'd love to see them too. But again, please remember, it is a UI toolkit, not a full-blown operating system. So interfacing with the hardware can be a little harder, especially in things like mobile, where Android has your app pretty much locked down for security reasons. So you can't do a lot without going directly through the operating system, and therefore we have to interface with it. And another thing someone on the Flutter team once told me, okay, because I thought at one point that Flutter would be a great replacement for the Java runtime environment. And he looked at me and he said, "You're out of your mind." And I was like, "Well, why would that be?" And they said, "Do you have any idea how many drivers we would have to write?" So Google is never going to give us the budget for that many people. It's never going to happen. So
I can take Vinay's question there. Is it okay to use web-only packages in production code? Yes, if you're using it for the web. But the problem with that is if you ever need to port that to something that doesn't use JavaScript, you might be in trouble. It depends on your goals, really. We can't answer that question without understanding more about your strategies and where you think what you mean by production code. But yes, generally it's okay.
I mean, if you're using web-only packages for a web-only app, sure.
Yep.
Why not? Let me see here. I think we're pretty much out of questions there. Randall, have you seen anything on Stack Overflow you think everybody needs to know?
I think one of the things that people, but this just came up in the last 24 hours somewhere. And by the way, let me say, what do I have open right now? I have Gitter, Slack with like 5 or 6 Slacks. I have Discord with 5 or 6 Discords now.
Mhm.
I occasionally watch tweets, but rarely. You can say my name and I'll probably pick up on it, but that's about it. Randall Schwartz, just like it says on the screen here. I'm reading Stack Overflow. I'm reading Reddit, all the subreddits related to Dart and Flutter. So there's a blur of stuff coming at me. But one of the things that I perked up on just in the last, I think, 12 hours or 24 hours, something like that, is someone was complaining that their code was getting far too far to the right on the screen. And they wish that the tab stops were smaller or something. And I went, you need to refactor. And there are tools for refactoring in the IDEs to be able to extract widgets, which is your primary goal. If you can get a widget out of there somewhere that you can reuse, even if you have to parameterize it a little bit so you can reuse it in different ways in different places, that's a win. That's definitely a win, because then you're providing a logical name. This is similar to the decades of programming that we've been able to develop. Why do we have subroutines? We have subroutines because we want to give a set of steps a particular name and maybe parameters in and out. You can do exactly the same thing with extracting a widget in the display. And what do you know? All of a sudden, there's not as many indent stops. Very nice that way. You can also just extract methods for your current class, which is handy if you need to get access to your state in the same widget. But now the code is pulled out and named separately. And the extract method in at least VS Code, and I think it also does this in the other IDEs, also even figures out that this section of code requires these other 3 values that it's accessing, and creates those as parameters when it extracts the method. It's really automatic. It's really, the widget one does that too. It's really automatic. Just try that stuff.
Well, and another thing too, if the code is going way too far out to the right, an interesting thing that some people don't realize is you have to put that last comma in there on the right-hand side, because what ends up happening, let's say you have a list and you have an item and a comma and 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 an item. No comma after the list. And you format, it's going to keep your whole list on one line. You put a comma at the end of that and use Dart format again, boom, puts everything vertically, all your items. It's that last comma after the last item. Now, the IDE, the code does not fail because it'll run just fine. You don't have to have that trailing comma because there's nothing after it that you need a separator for. But the formatter will use that comma to determine whether to keep everything on one line or pushing it all vertically. So
that's unlike the idea about extracting a widget, though. A widget creates a separate rebuild boundary. And what that means is if the framework can determine that this particular widget doesn't need to be laid out differently because we're not changing anything about it, like a stateless widget, only the parameters that went in can affect its layout. It's done. The framework works really hard to figure out when that happens and doesn't rebuild widgets, but it can't rebuild only part of a method or it can only run part of the code lines. It doesn't know how to do that. It can't do that. So extracting the widgets creates an opportunity for optimization of your build times, and everybody's excited about getting something to work faster.
Okay. Ashish, hopefully I got your name pronounced right there. Talking about web, what's the best way to avoid, I'm going to put a pin in that, avoid lazy loading, because when you host a website using Flutter, it's very, very slow. Okay, first of all, what you need to do is use lazy loading. Use lazy loading. You don't want to avoid it. You actually want to use it, and you have to specifically use it, because the thing is you're not using it unless you use deferred imports. Okay. Now, another big warning thing here. We're trying to get everyone to understand. You don't usually want to make your whole website in Flutter. Flutter produces a web app. Okay. Now, do you want your whole website to be a web app? Well, first of all, if you make a 10-page website a web app, it's going to download the whole 10 pages before it displays page 1. And then your SEO is going to tank, because one of the key factors is how fast your website loads. And if you're loading 10 pages before you show 1, first of all, you're going to get a huge load time, which is terrible. And number 2, the search engine is going to look at it and say there's a ton of JavaScript that's not being used. And it's not being used because that's page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, but the engine doesn't understand that. So one of the things that we often say to do is you make your web page a web page and use Flutter to make the web app that goes into the web page. Or if you're really dead set on making the whole thing in Flutter from top to bottom, now you need to start using deferred imports to intentionally use lazy loading, because that way your first page will load as soon as it has everything it needs for only the first page. That's going to make your load times faster, and it's going to help your SEO. And it's going to help your user experience, because they're not going to be sitting there staring at the screen.
One of my projects that I want to do a POC for, proof of concept, is to build just a framework that can take markdown files from a RESTful server and essentially create a website experience, but only basically rendering markdown files, which are pretty rich, and even with links and stuff, and then have just enough framework downloaded with the first page that it would be a fairly light load, and yet you could have 100 pages in that, but it would just need to be restfully loading them as it went through, which is no different really than what your browser is doing with a standard website.
Okay. Okay. This is a different phrasing of a beginner's question we see all the time.
Yep.
I'm Naman, I hope I didn't destroy your name. Architecture in the project is, I realize that it's architecture, but what ends up happening is in Flutter, the state management approaches are organized in a certain way. Each one is organized in a different way. I want to be clear on that. And then that becomes your architecture, or a huge, huge part of it. So what it is you want to decide on a state management system. And once you do that, it's going to help you create an architecture for your project. Block is very rigid in that. There's a very set way to do it. Provider is a little bit more loose. You're using a lot of models there. Redux, I wouldn't try to start with Redux, only because anybody who uses it will tell you Redux is a very advanced technique. Now I know if people are coming from React Native, you might be like, well, what? We use it all the time. I understand that you use it all the time. We have some simpler ways to do things. So why would anyone use Redux? Because it's so complicated? Because Redux eliminates the possibility of a lot of bugs. There is a whole bunch of bugs that you will never have if you use Redux. And that's wonderful. But the work to set it up will make you crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks, Ganesh. I know that the chair is going away here. I'm fading into the darkness.
Yes, I don't have a green screen at this place, but I have a nice background on Zoom and on Google Hangouts of Crater Lake, which is a lake in Oregon, my home state. So, yeah, it's beautiful. Can't see that here though. We don't have that technology with StreamYard. Not yet, anyway.
And I'm sorry, Naman. If you've got to start somewhere, right now the recommendation is still provider. Although the person the Flutter team is recommending provider, but there's a lot there, but they also list out a lot of possibilities. The person who wrote provider is now recommending Riverpod, which the same person wrote both.
Mm-hmm.
Riverpod addresses some problems that Provider had. And if you want an easy step into Provider, look up Scoped Model. So Scope Model is the easy win. And then once you know Scope Model, it's actually a very short step to Provider. And then once you know Provider, it's a short step to Riverpod. But those are going to be one approach of doing things. Don't forget, you can also use Get-It. As I said, a lot of people like GetX. Again, I'm still trying to learn more about it because no one I know is using it. It's just very confusing. It's got all these stars, and it's like, and at first we were wondering how in the world it has the stars, but it does have a number of contributors. So there has to be an ecosystem for it. And from what people are telling me, as I said, is it's maybe in India and a number of other non-English speaking countries. So there's some kind of disconnect there, and we're going to try and figure out what's going on. By
analogy, I want to say what I've heard about GetX. From ignoring all the politics of it, but I've heard about GetX is that it provides very simple canned ways to do very straightforward tasks. The problem with GetX always seems to be reported as, but if I want something that's kind of like that, how do I provide the variance? Because it's providing you A, B, and C, but not D and E. And you have to figure out how to use D and E with some other system sometimes. Whereas something like Provider, or in my preference, Riverpod, you're provided very fundamental building blocks, sometimes too many to figure out which one to use. But you're provided fundamental building blocks that you can wire up to make it look like block, to make it look like almost any other state system. It's those things are very flexible. Remy did a great job on both of those. And by the way, Riverpod is listed on the state management page now, so it's not less official than Provider.
So what I have heard about GetX is that GetX is said to be very simple, but some people when they do use it, again, if they have more custom needs, they say that it's simplistic, which is a bit different, which basically simplistic is, yes, it is simple, but if you're going to try to make it do something a little different, you can't, or at least they don't know how to do it. Another thing I've heard is that it tries to do too many different things. But again, I want to do the state management roundup. We're trying to get everybody's schedules together. Johnny is going to be invited. Hopefully we can get a good look into all that. So let's see here.
I can do the next one.
Which one is the next one?
Duraka. I said it in the chat. Durak 0. Sorry. Is that an O or a 0 at the end? I can't really tell. But his question is, in a list of widgets, like a column or a row or a list view, and the widgets are related, does it make sense to modularize? Can I separate them into a new widget? Absolutely. At the boundary of any single widget you already have in your thing, you can bring that out. But more likely what you're going to want to bring out is 2 or 3 related widgets, and then you can give them a name. But you're still going to have a top level that is the same as some existing widget that you've either created or is part of the standard.
Define top level.
When you say return something, when you're in a build method, you say return something. That something has to be a widget. So it has to be one of the SDK widgets, or it has to be one of the widgets you've created in this similar way. So if you think, oh yeah, I always have a column and I want to put a scroll controller that works a particular way and all that stuff, you can put all that in your own custom column essentially, and call it whatever you want that's logically named for the things it's doing, and provide parameters to it to control things like maybe what list that column is on, that sort of thing. Yeah, you could definitely abstract all that. That's all the basic widgets are anyway. They were abstractions of other abstractions of other abstractions with enough knobs and dials that you could hopefully use it for whatever you want, but that's not always true, as I said earlier in the chat.
You're asking, okay, the next question there is, but how? And one of the things you want to do is right click on a class constructor. right click on the widget. Okay. And then go down to refactor and extract Flutter widget. It should pull it out. Sometimes it will give you an error. And if it gives you an error, I usually just roll my eyes. I highlight the widget and its entire subtree. So I've got the whole thing. I cut it. I create a stateful or stateless widget, whichever one I need, drop it in there. And then I'm doing it manually.
Yeah.
But automatically usually does work. It usually works very well. However, sometimes if you've got a whole different, if you've got a bunch of the same widget repeatedly, or like maybe you have a custom list tile, okay, and then you might need to manually create the variables and everything, the same way you would if you wrote it from scratch. But
yeah.
And I'm sorry, hang on.
There's a follow-on question here.
Okay. Don't know how to make a widget return a list widget.
Do you mean like a multi-child widget, like a column or a row?
Okay. I think I might see what's going on here. You know what? No, wait. A list widget is actually using a builder.
Possibly.
That's not, you might be having a problem with trying to return something that's using a builder. Try moving up one level. So if you have your list widget and it's in a container, or if it's in a sized box, move up one level and then extract from the container or the sized box on down. That should straighten it up for you.
The rest of that question is useful, though, because I was actually going to bring up spreads earlier. That question isn't the thing, just the word spread. The idea is that a lot of people, because there have been many, many, many tutorials already written over the years, but Dart has continued to advance. And a lot of the earlier tutorials don't talk about some of the more modern features. The favorite one I have that got added that everybody should be familiar with is the use of spread. That's having a list constructor or a map constructor that uses, or a set constructor, I think, that uses ... somewhere in the middle to say, take the contents of this other thing and do a shallow copy of it and drop it right in to here. So that is one side of the spread. The other thing that's handy, and I see this question come up over and over again, how do I only sometimes include this widget in this list of children? Another aspect of when spread got added is they added conditional and for loops, if and for, in the middle of a list constructor. So you can actually
danger, Will Robinson.
You can get completely obscure using this stuff, but I found it really handy. Suppose you have A, B, C, D, and E, but C should only be in that list when there's a certain Boolean set. You can actually say if that Boolean C. That's handy.
What is rule number one in a lot of mobile development? Don't put your logic in your UI code.
Right.
And what is this giving us the capability of?
No, this is view stuff.
No, it is. But the thing is, though, is it's using logic to dynamically create your view.
Yes.
So it does belong in there, but be careful how much you use it for. If you're not using it to create something people see, then you're probably not using it. You're abusing it.
Right.
So
anyway, look at spreads. Just Google for Dart Flutter spread, and you'll see the specs on that.
And Darshan, that is actually the same exact thing we were talking about when choosing a different state management system, because they force you into an architecture or into a structure. Now, before we get into this one, the next one here, which is not bad, we have another special guest here. And hopefully we will be able to get him on with all of the other state management creators at the same time. But for right now, we have the author of Provider and Riverpod, Remy.
Remy? Remy's here?
Hello.
Hey, Remy. I don't think
Hello,
I've ever
Remy.
actually talked to you. I just posted questions in your issues. That's all.
I think
Hasn't everybody
we
posted
discussed
questions?
before. I think we discussed before. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I remember seeing you on issues for sure.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I have my own issues. I'm probably
I have
I'm
plenty
probably
of
the
issues.
biggest cheerleader for Riverpod these days. That's what I've been told.
There we go. Okay, a couple of quick ones. Yeah, actually, Elias just did answer that one question. You want to use stateless whenever possible, but don't kill yourself trying to make it happen. If you really need something to be stateful, just make it stateful.
Yep.
The reason that you know one from the other is when you build something on the screen, is its value going to change? Okay, with the counter app, the number on the text changes. That's the only thing that needs to be stateful. You really don't need to have the whole app be stateful.
Yep.
So you could make it all stateless except for the one little thing that changes. So, and one other quick one real quick. Can we create a game with Flutter? Absolutely.
We talked about that. We talked
in
about that
2D.
earlier. Yes, 2D games.
Right now. Now, if you are an Android expert, you can pull in an activity that has 3D and make that work. But that's a whole different question. So, and you hope no one asks a question about, we have Remy sitting here. Yeah, really. We've had about 12 questions on state management already.
Yeah. Have you been
So Remy,
following those?
while we're waiting for people to throw in a gazillion questions for you, what you created Riverpod because you felt that there were things that you wanted to do with Provider that you couldn't do.
Yeah.
Right. What were some of those things? Why? What? Okay. First of all, one of the hard things for people is being able to use Provider in order to pass, and when they have to work with the back end logic, when they have to access those values outside of the tree. Okay, that's probably the biggest question that I hear over and over and over again. So how do you do that in Provider? How do you do it in Riverpod? Is it the same, or did you adjust something in Riverpod to make that easier?
I mean, if your question is about how to access objects without a build context, because I think that's the way people formulate it the most of the time. Like, how do I read a provider without a build context?
Yes.
You'll get the same question in Riverpod, and that's actually voluntary that you still have this requirement. But there is a way to do it. Like, technically, Riverpod doesn't need build context. It has its own graph. It doesn't even rely on widgets for reading values. But it still voluntarily uses a graph of objects. So you still need some value to read providers. We should usually call it a provider reference or a widget reference that's coming soon in the next version, which would be kind of like a build context. But in my opinion, the question is likely, how to say, the question of how to read values out of the build context is likely incorrect, in the sense that that's not really your problem. You may instead simply want to pass the build context as parameter to something, or pass just a function that is able to read providers. So that's how we typically do it in Riverpod. We just pass a function that is able to read providers. It's not dependent on provider, so you can share it across across pure Dart packages if you want to.
Cool.
So what were the things in Provider that you were trying to do that you couldn't do, so you went and created Riverpod? In other words, what was missing and how did you make it happen?
Honestly, it's not just one thing in general. It's I see Riverpod as numerous tiny improvements that, when combined, improve things exponentially. Like, for example, a small, well, it's not so small one, but you get compile safety, which I think is quite a big benefit. Like, often an argument against compile safety is like, well, I won't make typos when I write my code. But yeah,
I
mean,
don't need a debugger. I don't put bugs in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be fair, that's actually true when you first write the code, but I think while compile safety is truly important, is not when you first write the code, because this time when you first try it, you wrote it yourself, so you know it works. But when you start doing refactoring, it starts to become useful.
Mhm.
Like if you're refactoring something synchronous into something asynchronous, for example, you likely have a bug, even with types. So you likely need to change more things than just the provider definition, but it's not immediately obvious. Whereas with Riverpod, you get this safety where if you refactor the provider to a future provider, for example, everything that now needs to deal with loading and error states will not compile anymore, so that you need to update your code. So you get this smooth refactoring flow where you know all the mistakes you have and it's very repeatable.
Okay, let me play DevRel for a second. Remy's the engineer, and he just said something that's really cool, but I'm afraid that people in the audience might not have the experience to understand the significance of what he just said. He just said with Riverpod, if you turn around and refactor and you go to asynchronous instead of synchronous, suddenly nothing's going to work. It won't even compile. This is a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And you have what's called compile time safety. And, and that's also a big part of null safety. But in other words, it helps you catch the bugs sooner, I think is the big sell there. Or am I wrong, Remy?
Yeah, basically it helps you catch bugs sooner. It also, in general, it also helps you learn things quicker, and I would say, because like from a beginner perspective, when you use Riverpod, if you wrote something stupid, then it doesn't compile. Whereas, let's be honest. Whereas if you're using providers and you will have an exception and you will make an issue on GitHub because why the hell does this throw at runtime? Why do I have an exception? Right? Yes. Is it a bug in provider? Like people think often that their exception is in fact a bug in provider, something not supported. Whereas,
and in all seriousness, it's a lot easier and faster to fix an error in code that won't compile than it is to fix an exception that's blowing up after your code has loaded onto your device.
Yeah.
So it makes your life easier in that way.
Yeah. The only sad part, in my opinion, is that with compilation errors, the error messages are not always ideal. We can't really customize them. So at the moment in the documentation, I have I copy paste the error message that are like, what the hell is this? And I try to say, hey, this is normal. Here's why you have this compilation error. So that's the only downside. I wish we had a way to customize error message, maybe in the future.
I see that in the latest releases of Riverpod, probably not anything that's pushed to pub yet, but there's something of a Riverpod command line. What is that about?
Oh, it's a refactoring tool for helping you migrate to higher versions of Riverpod, because the recent release introduced some breaking changes, and as the next one will introduce some breaking changes too. So the goal was to make the migration as simple as possible. You just do Riverpod migrate, and it analyzes your project, and it finds every change that needs to be done, and it does them for you. Which is another benefit of compile safety, because since it's compile safe, we know how to do the refactoring.
Any chance of getting a provider to Riverpod migrating tool?
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking for a while.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
I mean, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was joking. I was joking.
No, I'm not joking. Personally, I'm not joking.
Wow.
Uh,
Any chance of getting a Redux to Riverpod conversion tool?
How about block?
I
Block
mean-
to Riverpod. Let's do them all.
I mean, if it's possible, yeah, sure. The main benefit of doing provider to Riverpod is the migration is definitely easier to implement because of how similar the packages are. Like there are still some complex things we need to think about for the migration tool. Because, like, for example, you know that in provider you can place providers anywhere in your widget tree, whereas in Riverpod they are all globals in a way, besides some edge cases. So you still need to deal with those for the migration tool.
No, just in case. I mean, I'm sure there are going to be people watching who don't understand why we're laughing. Provider to Riverpod is a change like taking a Porsche and changing it into a Lamborghini. Whereas if we say Redux and change it into Riverpod, what it is we are taking a Boeing 747 and trying to change it into a Lamborghini. You cannot change an airplane into a car. Okay. You can change a car to a different car, but you can't change an airplane to a car.
Well, I'm sure you could do some things, but yeah, that's not ideal.
One of the
pretty
things
much.
I've gotten feedback about Riverpod and the change from provider is they talk about, oh, I have to declare a global variable for rendezvous. What the heck is that all about? And I said, you were using globals already because class names are globals.
Yeah.
And you can't get around that. At least with a variable, you can put it as a class member. You can put it in a private scope, in a library. There's all sorts of places to hide the rendezvous endpoint for a provider or for a Riverpod that won't be available on provider.
Before I do this to Remy, and I'm going to do it to you, you know this. Well, he is. Okay. But before I do this to you, I want to bounce back to the DevRel real quick and something I was taught. If you are going to get into teaching, then you have to remember it is not the same stupid person asking you the same stupid question for the 5,000th time. It's the 5,000th intelligent person asking you the same intelligent question for their very first time. So you have to answer it as if you are answering it for the first time, because as far as they're concerned, you are. And if you can't handle that, then get out of teaching. Now, that said, Remy, what Randall was just talking about, declaring a global variable. But when you use it, is it global? No, you've never answered this before.
Well, it's technically on the documentation. I think I have some line somewhere that says providers are globals without being global, something like that. That's what I mentioned before about Riverpod voluntarily using an object to access properties. So you need something similar to build context for reading providers. Mm-hmm. And what this does is that suddenly mean if you're familiar with the concept, that's like containers in dependency injections. Like if you look it up on Google, you'll see this concept. It's very easier to look it up because it's complex. But it's basically instead of having everything providers don't store their state themselves. The state of a provider is not inside the provider. It's in a separate object that is potentially in your widget tree, which means that, say, you write tests. The difference between a true global variable and what Riverpod does is when you do two tests, global variables are shared between both states. So if you mutate a counter somewhere as a global counter, in the first test it may be at 0, and in the second it will start at 42, for example, which is bad because we want the test to start from scratch again. Otherwise, our test could be broken.
So having one part of the app mutate the global and then the other part of the app gets the mutated global is bad. So what you're saying is you want it to start over again so that they both get the same. Basically, if the global is at 0 and this one changes it to 1, you want the next one that accesses it to get it as 0, not as the mutated 1. Correct.
A simple case would be, say we have a global counter. We may want to write 2 tests. We want to test that when we increment the counter, then the widget reveals, and we may want to test that, I don't know, the initial value is 0. So in this case, depending on the order in which your test pass, both may pass or only one of them may pass. Like, for example, if you run the test that increments the counter before the test that verifies that the initial value is 0, you'll see that the second test that checks the initial value is 0 will actually fail, because the third test will modify the global state, but the single test will have the current state, not the initial state, because it's shared between tests. Is there a way to work around it? You can define reset functions, but it's very complex. That's not very maintainable because then you have to reset every single one of them. Like you can deal with those things. Like if you're using getIt, for example, it's kind of an in between where you have a global variable, a global mutable variable technically, but it's still it's everything is contained inside a container that I mentioned before. That has a reset function, so you can reset it inside between every test. So yeah, going back to the fact that they are not global, you could technically, like say Dell doesn't support multi-threading, but technically that would work if we had multi-threading. We could technically have 2 threads access different states if we wanted to at the same time, because they are not actually global. I'm not sure that probably wasn't very clear. And anyways, that's not really the true important part. I would say one of the reason it's not really global in this is because you're still able in some cases to like, for example, scope a value to a widget, to a part of the widget tree. You can still do that in Riverpod with something called scope provider. So that's because you still have a graph of providers. So you could do that, or like, as opposed to global variables, you also have the ability to override some things, which is a common use case for dependency injection, to replace implementation of something with something else. And when you're using Riverpod, although the providers are global, you can still, as they implement by default, this override mechanism, so you can replace implementation of the provider with something else, which covers most testing scenarios.
Okay. Stefan had a great comment just a moment ago. Did you pick that up, Scott? Yeah, there we go.
Nice.
So, good job. Good job.
Here we go, Remy. I'll mail you a cookie.
Yay! Let me take one.
How's that
Remy,
for fast?
Yeah. So Remy, there have been a number of videos now that have been done about Riverpod. Do you ever take the time to watch them? And how often do you cringe at the screen?
More recently, I kind of don't have the time. Well, at least I don't really look into it.
Okay.
Let's be honest. I watch some of them sometimes. but they are fine. The only potential issue I have is that apparently they are quite low level at the moment, probably because the community doesn't really understand provider else at the moment.
Okay, your
Um,
noise limiter in your computer is cutting off parts of your words sometimes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's I think I heard a little bit of an echo in the room, and I think what's happening is your computer is trying to compensate with a little bit too much noise limiting.
Is that better?
Technology. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I'll know when you talk more.
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, the last time I checked, the only thing I saw is videos were a bit too low level well, not low level, the opposite, to beginner oriented.
Yep.
We kind of need to see more advanced use cases, but that I can understand why that is the case. I mean, even the documentation of Riverpod is quite low, beginner oriented.
Yeah.
So we need those complex use cases.
Resocoder's been doing some really, really good ones. Yeah. I mean, there's quite a few names. I immediately blanked my head, but I was just watching Resocoder's Resocoder. I have no way to pronounce that. Just been doing some wonderful stuff with that. Can I ask a deep question?
Yes.
A technical question?
Also, let's not forget PK. So Pawan Kumar, also on YouTube, is MTech Viral.
Yeah, there's been some good ones there.
Yeah, he and Resocoder both do really good stuff.
And Andrea did some stuff.
How can we forget?
Yeah.
Andrea,
there's many of them.
Yeah. I watch them all. I have to, because I got to know what's out there in the community. So the question I had is I saw somewhere that context.read makes sense, but context.watch you would never use. Can you explain why?
What?
I know. That's why I was puzzled by the comment as well.
No, I use watch more so.
Not the watch separate thing from the builder. I'm talking about context.watch. There was some reason that said don't use this, and I don't know why. Okay, I'll have to go find it again.
Well, I probably don't want to use it because it doesn't exist.
Well,
there's no context.watch.
That's part of it. Yes, right.
It may be instead, what you may be referring to is instead, you don't use context.read inside the build method.
Oh, maybe that was it. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah.
I can't remember. Context.something was recently removed in a breaking change.
Select, maybe?
I can't remember.
No, context.select isn't implemented. Well, there is no context.thing besides context.read in Riverpod, and context.read is going to be removed soon. For context. I didn't realize. Yeah, for context. Instead of context dot, we'll soon do ref.read even inside widgets.
That's what it was. That's wonderful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Well, I like the idea of a hook widget not requiring an extra parameter in build. It just works. It just allows me access to stuff, even though I don't have. But then I have to end up using use provider and context.read in the callbacks. But that's sensible enough. But
and one benefit though is that by not using hooks, you can use a provider conditionally. Because you cannot use condition, you cannot do if something use provider, but you can do if something ref.watch provider, which is a big benefit if you're using if else in collections, for example. Do if something shows that, else shows that. So yeah, that's useful for that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do we see anything else? Stefan's got another question there.
Let's see here. Where are we at? Stefan, there we go. So the only thing I missed is how to use scroll controller.
I'm not sure what's your issue.
It's another one of these things probably that you understand how it's working behind the scenes, and sometimes the docs don't make it clear. I have to admit, diving into the source for your packages from time to time, just because the docs could have used a bit more examples that were
Oh yeah, for
a
sure.
little more real world. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes the output of a stream provider seems a little weird, and I have to figure out that I have to put it inside a watch or a use provider to get something more weird out of it. But then I know what those are. There's like this sequence of transforming it from one weird thing to another weird thing, but that one's better documented. I can use when on that one.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I kind of agree that that's a common issue with my packages. Mostly because I don't like doing that. So of course, of course, it's going to be the issue.
I
Like,
remember
I force myself with Riverpod, but yeah.
this. You know, Flutter's beginning to get mature when we can play I Remember When. But
hooks.
I remember when somebody thought that was the most wonderful thing in the world. Somebody on this show right now, and no, I mean you were really, really happy with hooks, and I imagine you still are. Just serves a different purpose, but it kind of. I remember I was in Chicago, getting ready to give a talk. I was up until 1 a.m. finishing the talk, and so I wake up at 7 the next morning. I look at Slack, and I think it was you who said MobX is coming to Flutter, and I'm like, my talk's about state management, and already it's deprecated. I'm not even in Uber yet.
Which you are you talking to there?
Remy. Sorry.
Okay, you can't tell. We're all facing forward. None of us can tell who we're talking to when you say you.
The day that everybody learned that MobX was coming to Flutter was the same day I was giving a talk on state management, and I had finished the talk the night before.
Oh yeah.
And it didn't have anything in there about it. So, but no, hooks. Your whole inspiration for hooks and everything came from React Native. And there was
not native, just React.
Oh, just React. Oh, watch my mouth.
I mean, they're available in React Native too. It's just not specific to React Native.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really an inspiration at this point. It's just a board, as opposed to Provider and Riverpod, which take inspirations from other things, but are not just copy paste.
Okay, so hooks was more a direct port.
Yeah, I have some built-in support for Flutter utilities, but I didn't invent the concept. That's why I'm making it clear.
Okay.
One of the things I've gotten better out of Riverpod hooks is that I recognize that these are mimicking the React hooks. And I've been seeing examples of how to use, for example, use effect and some of the other odd ones like that. Use effect is much more powerful than most people realize. It can give you something both in an init state and in dispose, all in one little quick annotation. Very cool.
Yeah. Although I believe it's not in its ideal form. I have some ideas on how to improve it. I think the current syntax for Riverpod providers is very closer to what we want for use effect.
Okay.
In the sense that typically we want to combine use memo or use memoized with use effect, at least in Flutter, to on top of creating an object for the first time, we also want to subscribe to the object, for example, with animation controllers or whatever.
Yeah.
And providers do that quite nicely, where instead of returning a dispose function, the effect of providers is that instead they take a ref parameter, and you can do ref.onDispose and do something there. And instead the function returns the state created. So you do both creation, dispose, and the object is listened. So you get all these three logic at once. You could have, for
Yeah,
example, on your you could have a set state function on ref.setState and do some things there if you wanted to.
well, actually, a provider is lazy, right? It would be until somebody watches or reads it, it's just going to be idle code, right? Not going to actually be run. So you could use that for the equivalent of set state, and you just need to dispose on there as well, which you do have, ref.dispose, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's kind of the goal of providers. They kind of like do all the logic around state mutation, both watching dependencies and whatever. Yeah,
Nice.
It's quite a neat syntax. I like it.
Yeah, and you have to use the family thing though to control if you want multiple instances that have separate life cycles, though, right?
Well, you don't necessarily have to. You can just create multiple providers.
True.
Which is one of the benefits. Once again, I think it's quite underestimated. But the ability to create multiple objects of the same type, multiple providers of the same type, is quite important. Because, like, I remember when I announced Riverpod, people were like, "Yeah, but I don't create multiple providers with the same type, so I have only one type per provider." But that's not necessarily the case if you're using like scoped providers, where depending on where you are in the tree, you obtain a different object. So you technically have more than one provider. Whereas here you can, if you want to just have multiple states, you can just create multiple providers. So makes sense for sure.
You could generate 1,000 providers and put them all in a list.
Yeah, you can even pass providers as parameters widget if we wanted to.
Yeah,
it's possible.
Cool.
Okay. I'm not going to put this one up there because I think it would just create confusion. But sorry, Osama Karim is asking about something that stated someone should never use functions for refactoring because functions are not good for performance. You must have misunderstood something in what they wrote because it's just not making any sense.
That's relating to an
the way
earlier
it's
part of the
expressed.
conversation. That's an earlier part of the conversation I was having in the chat room. I was talking about refactoring widgets out because then you can have rebuild boundaries that you don't have. You just have functions.
Yeah,
refactoring functions. Yeah.
Well, so basically your function is still returning a widget.
It can be, but it's not. But if it's not a build, if it's not a separate and extends widget of some kind, then you don't get the build boundary.
Right. And the build boundary, that one of the biggest things you get with a build boundary is an updated context.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the functions are just fine for performance. There's really no other way to perform as far as I know.
Yeah.
Got to start at main.
I've got to stop making faces. Someone's going to screenshot that. Sali, stop.
Let me do that.
No, you know Sali's going to do it. Anyway, maybe some other people too. But all right. We are coming up on 2 hours right now.
Their usual stop time. Well, no, there's no such thing as usual stop time on this show. It's gone. Really. It's gone an hour. It's gone 3 hours.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is we could keep going forever, but we go an hour, we go 2 hours, we go 3 hours, and we end up with no billable hours, and then that becomes a problem because we need to eat.
And I'm out of tea, so that we got to stop pretty soon. I'm out of tea.
And Remy, it's that's almost quitting time for you, isn't it?
Oh, technically it already is.
Okay. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yes.
And talking to us about Riverpod and provider. State management and all that sort of stuff. And
I like answering these sort of things.
You're welcome back anytime you want. We're pretty open with the schedule. So
feel free to remind me though, because I always forget that there is this event, so I need a thing.
Every Wednesday, every Humpday, except next week. Not next week though. We'll talk about that in a second.
Mercredi. All righty. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Remy.
We'll catch you next week.
No, we won't.
Bye.
No, we won't.
What do you mean we won't?
Bye, Remy. Google I/O.
Oh,
We're not going to be in the middle
Google
of Google
I/O.
I/O.
Yes. In fact, we need to put out a tweet for that. Google
Yeah.
I/O. Yeah, no. We do not want to end up in the middle of this.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know, if you've ever heard of WWDC for Apple, it's the same thing for Google.
Yeah.
It is the big event where you get to see everything Google's been working on.
Huge number of Flutter events in this one. This is going to be nonstop for us for a week or two as we review everything that it's gone on Google I/O. Yeah.
And it's not just Flutter, though. It's Android, it's Firebase, it's cloud. They come up and show what's been going on with the Nest Hubs, the hardware, and the Pixel phones. Yep. They also, good grief, what else? Different projects. Yeah. Like when we were all at I/O, there was this one project where they had a gentleman who had a stroke, took the voice recognition and figured out a way to get it to work for people who had speech problems, like when they had a stroke. Now, it takes several thousand hours to get it trained properly. But when someone has had a brain injury and no one else can understand them speak, it is an incredible thing for them to be able to walk into a business, talk to the phone, hold it up, and show the person what they want. And it gives them their ability to communicate back. And that was one of the greatest things I saw there. And there's a whole lot more, so I can't wait to see what's coming next week. So yeah, we're not going to be on camera. We're going to be watching somebody else who's on camera.
Yes, exactly. Or working. Working and watching at high speeds. That's probably what I'm going to have to do, though, for the whole 3 days. I'm not going to be able to watch it at 1x. It's going to be at 1.5 to 2x all the way through.
I'm just going to put it on live.
Yeah. Well, now that I have 2 clients, I got to actually work a bit more. So I got to figure out what I'm dropping out of.
I'm going to have to be working, but part of working is knowing what's going on in the industry.
Yep.
So with that said,
thanks, Remy. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you next in 2 weeks. Thank you for coming, Remy. I will bug you and let you know when it's coming ahead.
Thanks to Fitz
don't
earlier
hesitate.
today. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks to Fitz as well earlier in the show. If you missed it, you can always replay it. It's on YouTube.
Yes. It's on the video.
It's on a video. It's on the interwebs. All right. Bye, guys.
All right. See you.
See you later.
Bye.